So we're moving on with some more SOHCAHTOA, and they're telling us not to worry about the sine, cosine, tangent. Now they're telling us to worry about the cosecant, sec, and cotangent. They give us everything. For some reason, I like to put it all in order, so I'm going to probably do sine. And remember, the sine of 45 is opposite over hypotenuse, so that's going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Hey, I don't need that. I just need the cosecant, which I know when I flip that, I get root 2. The cosine, we're going to get the adjacent over the hypotenuse. I don't need that. I don't have to rationalize, but I do need the sec, and that's going to be root 2. And the cotan is just 1 over 1, or the tan is just opposite over adjacent, so notice the cotan is also just 1. So here's some rules of thumb. Notice the sine of 30 is equal to the sine of pi over 6, which is 1/2. Well, I think it's interesting that that is the same thing as the cosine of 60, which is the cosine of pi over 3, which is 1/2. So I'm just kind of highlighting here. Moving on, the sine of 45, pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. Cosine is going to be the same. And then 60, sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2, which is the same as the cosine of 30 degrees. So notice they kind of have some similarities there. Tan of 30, tan of pi over 6 is root 3 over 3, because remember that was 1 over root 3. Tan of 45, or pi over 4, is 1. And tan of 60, pi over 3 is root 3. A lot of students ask me if we have to memorize this. Again, you just need to know the quadrant 1 in location, 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 which tells you where to go. So let's get to a fun word problem. These are really going to help you when you're taking an SAT or a PSAT or an ACT. Let theta be an acute angle such that the cosine of theta is 0.96. Find the values of sine of theta and tangent of theta. Well, before we do a question like this, we do have to be familiar with what we call trig identities. So trig identities you will have to have memorized. So let's go ahead and look at them now. And we're going to talk about the things that we know. We know the sine of theta is just 1 over the cosecant, or the flip, where cosecant is 1 over the sine. We also know cosine of theta is 1 over sec. Secant of theta is 1 over cosine. Tan of theta, 1 over cotan. Cotan of theta is 1 over tan. Things we've also talked about, tan is sine over cosine. Cotan is cosine over sine. Now, the new identities that we're going to work with that we do need to know are our Pythagorean identities. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. And this is really the only one you need to know, and I'll show you why. 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta. 1 plus cotan squared theta is equal to cosecant squared theta. So you're probably extremely curious why I say you only need to know the 1. If you know sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1, and let's say I divided everything through, let's start with sine. Well, let's talk. Isn't sine squared theta over sine squared theta equal to 1? Isn't cosine over sine equal to cotan? And isn't 1 over sine equal to cosec? Well, Well, that's strangely familiar to the one in blue right here. Strangely familiar. And guess what? I bet, I'm going to erase because it's going to be easier. I bet when I divide everything through by cosine, so let's divide everything through by cosine squared theta. Well, sine over cosine is tan, plus 1, cosine over cosine is 1, equals the secant. And isn't that strangely familiar to the red one right here? So we are going to use this identity to solve this question. So it says to find sine of theta and tangent of theta. Well, all they gave me was the cosine of theta, but I do know that sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. So if I subtract that cosine squared theta over, I get 1 minus the cosine squared theta. And that works because I know that 1 minus 0.96 squared, that will actually work. So when I put that into my calculator, I get the sine squared theta is equal to, well, that's going to be approximately 0.0784. And then to solve this, I'm going to take the square root of each side. So I know that the sine of theta is equal to 0.28. So I can say, hey, I solved for the sine of theta, 0.28. Now, they also ask us to solve for the tangent of theta. Remember that tangent is sine, well, we figured that one out, over cosine. And when I solve that, I get approximately 0.2916, and I think that was repeating.